A year ago, we surely pledged our love to each other. I decided in my heart to live with this kind-hearted man. However, his attitude completely changed right after the marriage. The loving man he used to be is long gone. My husband no longer sees me as a woman. Now, I'm treated just like a housekeeper. All you need to do is listen to me and stay quiet. That's his catchphrase. I wonder how long this life will continue. At that time, I had no way of knowing that a ray of light would shine on me. My name is Michelle Jenkins, I'm 28. I work as a secretary at my father's company while also being a housewife. The company, once managed by my grandfather, was taken over by my father 2 years ago. Being the daughter of a business owner, I've always been kept at a distance. The men who approach me are mostly after money. Of course, I've never really been in love. At one point, I stopped telling people about my family background. That's when I met the man who would become my husband, a man named David. I had asked my friend, who introduced us, to keep my status as the boss's daughter a secret. David doesn't gamble or smoke at all. He does drink, but never to excess. He was my ideal man. He would tell me he loved me, that he adored me. I thought I could spend the rest of my life with such a man. However, when I decided to marry David, my father said this. Michelle, it's fine if you marry him, but could you keep it a secret that you're the boss's daughter? Dad, how many times have I told you? He's a very good person. He's not after money at all. That may be true, but I don't want you to have a hard time because of that. But if a year passes after you're married and David is still the same, let's talk about the company together. You can apologize for keeping it a secret then. All right. If you're that insistent, Dad, I'll do as you suggest. I agreed reluctantly with my father's proposition. My father knew of my past heartaches with gold-digging men. And as an overprotective parent, he worried I might get hurt again. I decided I could share the truth with David after a year as per my father's advice. And until then, I would just be an ordinary secretary. And so, under these circumstances, David and I got married. Now, a year after our wedding, I still haven't revealed the truth to him. The reason is simple. He is no longer the kind man he used to be. As soon as we got married, his behavior became cold and distant. He would come home from work, already in a foul mood, and began to nitpick at the dinners I prepared. Hamburgers for dinner, again? We're not children, can't you think of anything else? But, David, you used to love my burgers, didn't you? I've made them countless times before. Don't talk back. You're always short on dishes. Besides the easy dishes like salad and soup, you should be able to make at least 5 other dishes. 5 dishes. That's a lot. I have work too, you know. I can't manage that much. What? When I tell you to do something, you do it. I married you, so you should listen to what I say. I'm sorry. The warmth and kindness he used to show were gone, replaced by a coldness as harsh as ice. At the time, I only thought, he must have had a bad day, but his behavior started to get worse. By the time half a year of our marriage had passed, David had become a full-fledged tyrant. Not just about the cooking, he would complain about everything from the way I folded the laundry to how I cleaned the house. If I tried to protest even a bit, he would yell at me with a terrifying look on his face. Just being yelled at would have been bearable, but sometimes he would even throw the meals I made into the trash. A year after our wedding. His tyrannical behavior hasn't changed, and if anything, it's getting worse. Just the other day, I was delayed at work and didn't get home until after 7 p.m. As soon as I said, I'm home, he started yelling. You're late. What time do you think it is? I'm sorry. Work just got a bit out of hand. I'll start on dinner right away. Work got out of hand? A mere secretary like you don't have that much work to warrant staying late. But I really did. I'm handling some accounting tasks too, so there's a lot to process. Don't talk back to me. It's unthinkable for a woman to come home later than her husband. Next time, if you come back later than me, you're quitting your job. That's not fair. From fear of David, I couldn't talk back. Looking back, I wonder if I should have left him sooner. But I was pushing against the worry of my parents when I married. I couldn't reveal the truth. I didn't want to sadden my mom and dad. So, I silently bore it all by myself. Then one day at work, during a break, my father called me into the reception room. I often went in and out of the reception room because I often assisted my father as his secretary. As I entered, my father was already inside. "What's up?" I asked. My father, looking pleased, replied, "It's been a year since you got married to David, right? I think it's about time you told him the truth as promised." "Oh, yeah, we had that agreement." "Is something wrong? You don't seem happy. Didn't you say that David wasn't after the money?" "Well, yes, but it's just, right now, it's a bit." Seeing my troubled expression, my father smiled and tried to comfort me, patting my shoulder. "Did you have a fight with David?" "Well, you're both young and newlywed. I guess it's inevitable. My wife and I also had our fair share of arguments back in the day. But look at us now, still happily together. I'm sure you'll be okay, Michelle." "It's not exactly a fight. Don't worry, everything will be all right. I mean, every couple has their share of arguments, right?" "Well, I suppose you're right." "Anything else bothering you?" "No, nothing really. I'm okay. But I guess I want to wait for things to settle down a bit before I talk to him." "Haha. Well, don't let it get you down too much. A little marital spat is pretty common." It seemed my father thought we were just having a minor argument. To avoid worrying my parents, I hadn't consulted them about my husband up until now. Because of this, my father seemed to believe things were going well between us. "Well, you better make up with David soon." Saying that, my father left the room. Left alone in the room, I was choked with emotions I didn't know how to deal with. I had married David despite my parents' concerns. I absolutely couldn't tell my father about the deteriorating relationship between David and me. But, sooner or later, I'd have to talk about it or risk arousing suspicion. To prevent my father from becoming suspicious, I had to maintain my relationship with my husband somehow. And if possible, I wanted to steer our relationship in a positive direction. That night, I came home on time to talk with David, waiting for him to return. Just as I finished making dinner, he came home. I immediately broached the subject with him. "David, there's something I want to talk about." "Huh? I'm tired, you know." "It's important. Look, we're married, right? I want our relationship to be equal and enjoy our lives together every day." "Equal? Huh? What are you talking about? There's no way you and I are equal." My husband grabbed my hair, yanking it up harshly. "Ouch!" I couldn't help but cry out, but he didn't let go. As if mocking my wincing face, he slowly opened his mouth. "Listen well. I'm the one who did you the favor of marrying you. Be grateful that I deigned to marry a plain and useless woman like you." "Did me the favor? David, didn't you say you loved me?" "Don't make me laugh. I just pretended to like you because you seemed obedient and would be a handy housekeeper." That's not true. You just need to be quiet and listen to me, housekeeper." With these words, he yanked my hair towards his face. From that day on, I gave up hoping. There was no chance of us being equals. And I didn't want to worry my parents, nor could I get a divorce. My appetite dwindled day by day, and I ended up just living with my roommate, my husband. Then one day, while living such a life, I woke up feeling completely exhausted. My head hurts, and I feel a chill. When I took my temperature, it was a whopping 104 degrees Fahrenheit. I forced my aching body to sit up and called out to my husband. "David, I'm sorry. I don't think I can make breakfast today." "What? Why not?" "I've got a fever of 104. I'm in so much pain. Can I just stay in bed for the day?" At this, my husband let out a long sigh and yelled, "Slacking off chores because of a stupid fever? Get to work, you good for nothing." "But, please, forgive me. I'm really sick." "Shut up. Stop making excuses. You're just a housemaid. Don't you dare defy your master." "Please, just for today. I'm begging you." He clicked his tongue loudly, swung the door open with a bang, and left the room. Next thing I knew, my hands were shaking, and my body was trembling uncontrollably. I finally realized just how close to the edge I was being pushed. If I continue like this, I'll break down for real. Continuing to live like this, it'll drive me mad, body and soul. I need to do something. But what can I do? I want to think of a way out, but my fever is making my head heavy, and I can't think straight. Maybe it was because I'd been on edge for so long, but I fell back asleep. Several hours later, I was awakened by my husband's raging voice.
Hey! Didn't I tell you to wake up, you dumb woman?
Huh. David. Outside the window, it was already dark. My fever had gone down a lot, but my body was still heavy, and a faint headache lingered. Despite my state, he vented his anger.
I called you multiple times. What are you doing sleeping?
Called.
I sent you a text saying, I'm bringing my boss home, prepare drinks and snacks, didn't I?
Huh, wait a minute. You knew I was sick today, right? And yet, you brought your boss home.
I invited him to continue drinking at home. My promotion depends on this. Get up and get things ready, now.
No, I can't. I'm still in my pajamas, and I'm not feeling well at all.
Shut up. Just get out here now.
As he yanked me by the arm and forced me to stand in the kitchen, my husband then hurried back to his boss who was likely waiting at the entrance.
Sorry to keep you waiting. Please, come on in.
From the entrance, I could hear my husband speaking cheerily. Are you sure this is okay? This late? I'm sure your wife wouldn't appreciate.
That's what I've been saying. I don't have a wife, just a housemaid.
A housemaid.
Sort of like a maid wife, you could say. But please, don't mind.
As he said this, my husband led his boss into the living room. I was in my pajamas, without any makeup, so I bowed my head in embarrassment.
Nice to meet you. My husband is always telling me about you. I apologize for my appearance.
I'm the section chief, Mr. Smith. I'm sorry for intruding so suddenly.
Please, don't mind me. I'll prepare something right away.
As I returned to the kitchen, hiding my face, my husband let out a tirade.
Hey! Get a move on and make something. You're absolutely useless.
I'm sorry, just wait a little bit longer.
Instead of opening your mouth, move your hands. Despite the section chief taking the time to visit, how much more do you need to embarrass yourself before you're satisfied? Huh?
I'm sorry.
Sorry about this, Mr. Smith. Our maid is really quite useless.
The section chief sat quietly, his face slightly contorted. Even as I prepared and brought over the drinks and snacks, my husband kept making snide remarks like,
You're really useless.
When my husband went to the bathroom, Section Chief Smith started to speak. Excuse me. There was no way I could ignore him. Although I was flustered, I responded.
Yes, is there something you need? You're the daughter of CEO Allen, aren't you?
My maiden name was Allen. He was referring to CEO Allen, my father.
What? How did you? I had previously visited your father's company regarding a business deal. You served me tea then, didn't you? Wait, you were, from that time?
I usually attended all interactions with our business partners. Each time, I served tea and was introduced as the daughter of Mr. Allen. And Smith, he was one of those people. I was informed that David's workplace had become a client of my father's company, but I had not yet told my father that David was working at Smith's company. While glancing towards the bathroom, Smith continued in a hushed tone.
What's up with your husband's behavior? Is he always like this at home?
Yes.
I can't believe what you've been through. Why haven't you told Mr. Allen?
That is.
Regardless, we can't let this continue. Leave it to me.
Smith, while looking at me straight in the eyes, quickly packed up his things and left. In that moment, I felt as if something that had been restraining me was slowly being untangled. I felt a profound relief, as if I had finally found an ally. On the other hand, when David returned from the bathroom, he was stunned to find that Smith had left.
Why didn't you stop him, you good for nothing?
Despite his shouting, I decided to trust in Smith's words and endure it. Several days later, I was summoned by my father and headed to the company's reception room. Upon entering, I found Smith and a pale-looking David.
What? Why is David here? And Smith, you're here too.
I was confused, unable to understand the situation. In the tense atmosphere, my father started speaking with a stern expression.
I heard from Smith. You've been treated horribly by David, haven't you? I understand. You're kind-hearted, and you wanted to avoid worrying me, didn't you?
Dad.
Thank you, Smith. Thanks to you, I was able to save my daughter.
At my father's words, Smith bowed his head. Immediately afterwards, my father shot a withering glare at the ashen-faced David and coldly stated,
David, I can't believe you turned out to be such a scumbag. I shouldn't have let you marry my daughter. Wait, please!
David pleaded, shaking visibly.
I had no idea you were the president of our business partner. I didn't know Michelle was a CEO's daughter. Shut up! So if you knew, you would have treated Michelle better. You're truly a lowlife. No, there's a reason for this. A reason. I'm going to report you to your company's CEO. I'm acquainted with him, and we have a long-standing relationship. No way.
David filled his eyes with tears and crumbled to his knees. Then he turned to me with pleading eyes.
Michelle, say something to your father for me. You want me to say something, huh?
I raised my voice to vent my pent-up frustrations.
Do you have any idea how much I've suffered because of your overbearing, chauvinistic attitude? I've been holding it in all this time. I tried to improve our relationship. It's you who ruined everything, right? Treating me like a housemaid and constantly berating me. Do you know how humiliating that was? Wait, Michelle. Please forgive me. Shut up. Don't you dare casually call me by my name. No matter how much you apologize, I will never forgive you. I don't care if you fall into hardship, you get what you deserve. If you understand, never show up in front of me again. Stay out of my life forever.
At the end of my outburst, David started crying uncontrollably. Smith grabbed his arm, bowed, and left the reception room. Afterwards, David and I got divorced. When my father informed David's company's president about the incident, he lost his job as well. It seemed David had a poor attitude at work and was fired considering these factors. Because he was fired for a valid reason, he didn't get any severance pay. After the divorce, David apparently went back to his parents' house. However, his in-laws already knew about the incident. I heard his father gave him a stern scolding and kicked him out of the house. Now, he seems to be working day and night at a factory where he can live in. He probably doesn't have much of a cushion since he has to make alimony payments to me. On the other hand, after the divorce, I moved back to my parents' house. Now, I've completely recovered and am focusing on my job. Since then, I've been meeting Smith regularly and we have a good relationship. I'm not considering remarrying yet, but if I do someday, I want someone like him. When that time comes, I hope to build a happy family. I'd always yearned for a simple, ordinary family. Growing up in foster care, I was all alone in the world. I had foster parents as a child, but no blood ties. I wanted a family of my own. A perfect family, with a loving husband, adorable children, and me. So, when a kind-hearted man proposed to me, I was overjoyed. With this man, I thought, I could build that ordinary family I'd always dreamed of. But in believing so, I was the world's biggest fool. My husband, George, callously ordered me around after I came home from a long day at work.
Hannah, make dinner, now. Mom and Emily are starving.
Barely 2 seconds in the door, and he's commanding me to make dinner. George, my MIL, my CL, none of them ever think of cooking. My name is Hannah, and I'm stuck with this terrible family. At 29, I work for a large corporation. George, my husband, was a coworker I met at the same company. George is 30 years old, but since he couldn't get into college right after graduating high school, we graduated college at the same year. First of all, I have to mention that George is currently unemployed. He had a dispute with his boss in the sales department and quit his job. George was angry that his boss was cold-hearted, but I knew otherwise. Even though George and I were married, we worked in the same company but in different departments. I work in the general affairs department handling office work. My dedication and hard work were trusted and respected by my colleagues. It was during this time that the sales department manager, where George worked, came to me for advice. As I nervously asked him what was the matter, he opened his mouth tiredly.
Today, your husband suddenly handed in his resignation. Were you aware of this?
Shocked by the manager's hesitant question, I shook my head.
I wasn't told anything. Did something happen?
In response to my visible confusion, having truly not been consulted about anything, the manager explained the situation.
I want to respect my workers' personal lives as much as I can, but...
According to the sales manager, George would casually leave work even if his tasks were not finished. Moreover, he would forcefully dump his overtime work on his timid colleagues. When the manager confronted him about this, he lashed out in anger. George had falsely claimed that we shared housework since we both worked. Furthermore, he stubbornly insisted on leaving work on time, stating that he was worried about his frail mother and sister. When he used his family situation as an excuse, the management could not be strict with him. However, a colleague who had been burdened with George's work complained of mental and physical stress and wanted to resign. The manager advised George that if he prioritizes his family, he should finish his work on his own. George, angry that his argument was not accepted, quit his job on his own accord.
To be frank, I'm relieved that he quit.
While being considerate of my feelings, the sales manager expressed his honest thoughts. George was arrogant and burdened others despite his incompetency. When his boss pointed this out, he would react angrily without reflecting on his behavior. From what I hear, George was nothing but a liability to the sales department. Feeling guilty, I apologized profusely.
I am deeply sorry for the trouble caused to everyone in the sales department.
The kind sales department manager reassured me that it was not my fault. And he was disgusted by George, who had quit his job on a whim, without consulting his wife.
Just to confirm, is he really doing housework? And are your family members sick? All his claims are false. I do all the housework, and my MIL and SIL are healthy.
Upon hearing my testimony, the manager sympathized sincerely, saying, I see, that's tough. And that's how my husband George ended up unemployed. He believed that he would get a new job right away, but the real world is harsh. Despite his job hunting efforts, he kept facing rejections. George is resentful on his previous boss, believing that he had badmouthed him to other companies. I can swear that my company does not engage in such practices. Even after submitting a resignation, it is common knowledge among working people to stay in the company for at least a month. There are matters like work handover and procedures to be dealt with. However, George slammed his resignation letter onto the manager's desk and went home the same day. It was obvious to me that such an unreasonable person would not be hired by any company. George was content with giving his small severance pay to his mother and sister. He was raised in a single-parent family with his mother and sister, Emily. Their father divorced his mother and left, which seems to have been a wise decision. Both my MIL and Emily are healthy and capable of working, but they do nothing. I pay for our living expenses and do all the work. Whenever I ask George to help out at home, he yells at me.
My mother and Emily are my precious family. You're my wife, so you should be devoted to helping us out.
It made no sense to me, so I snapped back at him.
Forget about your mother, but Emily is 23 years old. At least let her get part-time job.
George adored Emily a lot, who was 7 years younger than him. Emily was also taking advantage of George's kindness, pleading for pocket money. As I firmly refused to give her money, George started working part-time. It was a job managing a warehouse for a courier service. George tells people around him that he quit his job at a major corporation because his family was sick. He is a man who lies as he breathes, just to keep his reputation. And so, George's part-time earnings became Emily's dating expenses. Not doing any housework or work, Emily started going out with men. I was fed up with my MIL stealing bills from my wallet out of her greed for money. Even if I talked to George about it, he would get mad at me.
Take care of my mom if you're my wife. This is why I can't stand people who grew up all alone in foster care like you.
My MIL scoffed at me, calling me, "Hannah, you're so wicked." I was living my days with the worst family. But one day, an encounter that changed my depressing daily life arrived. When I came home after buying groceries after work, there were unfamiliar shoes at the entrance. They were large-sized men's sneakers. I thought we had a guest over, since the shoes were larger than George's. Then, a young man popped out. He was tall, had a handsome face, and his hair was light brown. When I thought Emily had brought her boyfriend, the man apologized.
I'm very sorry. I was on the verge of dating Emily, but I'll take it back.
Contrary to his frivolous appearance, his tone was polite, a wise young man making sound judgments. I spontaneously asked the young man who was about to leave with his sneakers on.
What's your name? I'm Emily's Sil, Hannah.
When I introduced myself, the young man looked up and smiled a little. He looked like a player, but he had a smart expression. The man introduced himself after he finished putting on his sneakers. I'm James. I work as a bartender. Emily was a regular at the bar I work. According to him, Emily confessed to him and he was about to accept, but he declined. The reason was that Emily showed her true nature and spilled everything because of alcohol.
All my money is all from George's part-time job. My SIL is stingy and ugly. She makes me work and do housework.
James deeply regretted that he was inexperienced and couldn't spot a good woman because of that. But, he's a kind-hearted person who couldn't leave drunk Emily alone and sent her home. Moreover, James paid for the taxi fare. Just at such times, both George and my MIL were not at home. So, James got our house key from Emily, who was wasted, and carried her to our living room. I couldn't leave her at the entrance. I swear I didn't steal anything, ma'am. He seemed to be studying at a vocational school during the day and working as an apprentice bartender at night. He was called out by Emily after school. Emily lied about being a worker at a clothing store. James didn't see through Emily's lies and noticed her true nature at the last moment. He may look like a player, but he was a serious and sincere young man. His flashy light brown hair was his natural hair color. I'm mixed. This is the business card for the bar I work at. Sorry for the trouble. He's running late, but he said he's ready to work now. I see. Thank you for bringing Emily home. Have a great shift. When I said that, James went home with a smile. Normally, I would report a young man who was at home without permission and had a connection with Emily. But I intuitively thought that James was a trustworthy person with good nature. It was a silver lining that he hadn't been deceived by Emily. When I entered the living room, Emily was indeed drunk and asleep. She was an annoyance, but to avoid dealing with a potential cold, I covered her with a blanket. Suddenly, Emily woke up and opened her mouth, unable to pronounce her words exactly.
Hey, where's James? My boyfriend with brown hair, so handsome.
Emily, laughing boastfully, checked her phone and let out a scream. James had verbally told her he couldn't date her, but it was in vain. Emily was too drunk to understand James's intentions. But clever James had politely declined through a text. Emily had no recollection of revealing her true nature. She's crying and angry, feeling like James had abandoned her.
What's wrong about me? I've been deceived.
The one who deceived James was Emily, but it was unfortunate for James as well. As I ignored the commotion and started cooking dinner, George and my MIL came home. And upon hearing Emily's side of the story, George became furious.
Did he mess with you, Emily? Where does he work at? I'll punch him for you. We're going to demand damages. Poor Emily.
Indeed, Emily is foolish and pitiful, but it's completely due to her own resentment. As I was worried about causing trouble for James, Emily glared at me.
Hannah, did you say something to James?
She showed me the text on her phone, causing me to gasp. The message read, "I can't date a liar." Emily had drunkenly revealed everything, but she thought I was the one who tattled. George and my MIL also confronted me, so I explained the truth of my encounter with James at the entrance.
He was trying to take care of Emily and was about to leave the house when we ran into each other. That's all.
I asserted that I hadn't said anything unnecessary to him. George clicked his tongue and turned his face away from me.
Emily, let's eat sushi today. It's premium sushi.
George decided to order sushi delivery on his own. And he started eating the premium sushi with my MIL and Emily, all on my tab, without touching any of the dinner I had prepared. As I sat eating the dinner I had prepared alone, the three of them were laughing.
Eating sushi as a family is the best. It makes up for the usual terrible cooking. Really? It's so delicious. It compensates for the usual bad food.
George also agreed and laughed along with my MIL. While enduring their mockery, I felt more emptiness.
Is this the family I wanted when I got married?
How stupid. Suddenly, the face of my only family member with whom I'd become estranged after marriage floated in my mind. And for some reason, I recalled James's kind smile and was parted. A turning point for me arrived several days later. While cleaning the house on my day off, George brought me a bank book. Seeing the deposit notification, I panicked. The bank book recorded the savings I had carefully accumulated before our marriage. George showed me the cash card and seal with a triumphant look.
I'm giving the $100,000 you saved to my parents and sister. If you refuse, we divorce.
This was the money I had been saving for the future expenses of our child. I thought that if we had a child, George might keep a distance from his mother and Emily. But George completely denied my dreams, saying,
I care about my mother and sister more than our kid.
Do as you like. I had hoped to build a happy and ordinary family, but it seemed impossible. I showed George the divorce papers that I had prepared for him.
If you accept this, we're getting a divorce. It's over between us.
George joyfully filled in the necessary information on the divorce papers and handed them back. That was the end of things with him. Ignoring George, who was elated over $100,000, I packed my bags. Then I left the house and submitted the divorce papers, which got registered just fine. I, having divorced George, had returned to my adoptive father's house. My adoptive father is often absent due to work, so essentially I live alone. When I left home, I called my adoptive father.
Hannah, come back. To your family home.
I, who had been rebelling against my adoptive father since adolescence, felt like crying. Despite our strained relationship, my adoptive father forgave me, who used to be so ungrateful. Living quietly at home, memories from my childhood came back to me. The fact that I was taken from the orphanage to my adoptive father's house. At that time, I had an adoptive mother who loved me as if I were her own daughter. That adoptive mother passed away from illness when I was in junior high school. Since then, I had been rebelling against my adoptive father. I was lonely because my adoptive father was often absent due to work. But now that I think about it, both my adoptive father and the late adoptive mother cared for me. I was fixated on a normal family and had forgotten the love of those close to me.
I'm divorced now. I'm having a huge burden lifted off my shoulders.
With the load off my shoulders, I was now working hard. That's when I ran into James again. When I was about to leave work, I ran into the sales department's manager in the elevator hall. When I started to say good job today, the manager kindly spoke to me. You've been through a lot. You look better than before, and I'm so happy for you. The manager knew about my divorce with George. He sincerely praised me for holding up well. As I bowed and got into the elevator, the manager spoke in a serious tone. There's a bar that's been talked about in the sales department. I want to go, but it's a bit too fancy for an old man like me. I heard that the manager has a wife and children who is in high school.
What kind of place is it? A cafe or something?
Then the manager pleaded with me. It's a bar. I don't drink, but I'm fascinated by bars. So, he humbly asked me to accompany him. I know the manager is a sincere person, so I decided to accompany him to the bar. The bar, recommended by the manager's workers, was a hidden gem in the basement. The manager said, "Don't be nervous," as he opened the door to the shop. The interior was truly chic, the kind of decor that young people would like. I followed the manager into the shop, but was shocked when I looked at the bar counter.
James?
The bartender was James, whom I had bumped into before the divorce. He was a bit surprised too, but quickly smiled. Welcome. It's been a long time, Hannah. The flashy and handsome bartender's words made the manager raise his voice.
Do you know each other? The women in my department have been talking about a very handsome man working here. He looks like an actor.
As the manager laughed, James seemed embarrassed.
Not at all. I'm just an apprentice bartender. What would you like to order?
I'm not used to bars, so I ordered what James recommended. The manager ordered a non-alcoholic cocktail. The bar was quiet and clientele were refined. James' father was said to be the owner.
At first, I rebelled and went to college. But I ended up being inspired by my father's work.
James prepped a cocktail and I announced that I had divorced. As I was drinking the clear blue cocktail, the boss was unusually furious.
That woman's ex-husband is outrageous. I should not have given him a retirement allowance. Boss, did you get drunk on a non-alcoholic drink?
James prepared a mint soda, smiling at me who was forcing a smile. He offered the mint soda to the boss for free. The boss calmed down a bit and asked while drinking mint soda.
Hey mister, do you send drinks from other customers? Like in dramas?
James laughed cheerfully at the boss who was asking seriously. I've never done it. Urban legend perhaps? I was having a pleasant time at the bar when suddenly my phone rang. I was about to step outside, but James told me it was okay to answer the call here. Upon confirming who it was George, my ex-husband whom I had divorced. I was annoyed by the interruption of the fun gathering, but I answered because the calls were persistent. Before I could ask the purpose of the call, George complained loudly.
I can't withdraw money. Your balance is 0.
Of course.
That's after I transferred the deposit to another account.
Think about it. Would anyone keep a passbook with a $100,000 deposit in a house where those 3 greedy people live? It is for sure that it would be stolen, so I had to take measures in advance. The passbook George stole from me was a dummy. The real one was carefully hidden by me. That's why I still have the $100,000. When I told him, George was dumbfounded. He, my former MIL, and Emily were having a luxurious time overseas. They gambled, and as their funds started to run out, they tried to dip into my $100,000. However, they couldn't withdraw the money and were so distressed they called me. George threatened me to send all my assets immediately.
I refuse. I handed over the passbook obediently. I also gave up the house in the property division.
I coldly declared that I no longer knew anything about it. In the meantime, James asked me to lend him my phone. In front of me and the boss, he ruthlessly demanded George. "There is a tab of $3,000 of your sister's drinks. I'm sorry, but please pay." After saying only that, James returned my phone to me.
So work hard for your beloved mother and sister, big brother.
George cried for help, but I hung up the call. When I apologized for making a fuss, James offered me a cocktail with a smile. "It's on me." And a ginger ale for the boss.
Let's toast to the refreshing turn of events.
James, the boss, and I toasted to George's miserable fate. From then on, George really fell into hell of debt. When he was at a loss in a hotel overseas, a kind gentleman approached him. The gentleman was a president in finance and offered to lend him money if George was in trouble. George, who was in dire need of money, jumped at it without thinking about the interest. As a result, his debt ballooned to $500,000, and he was in a crisis. The kind gentleman even prepared a job for him to repay the loan. Now, it seems George is working on a fishing boat. Nobody knows where is it now. Emily and my MIL had an obligation to repay. Working from morning till night, except for sleeping. They sold their house and now lived in a small apartment. I was living as usual at my parents' home. Today, unusually, my foster father was here, so we were chatting.
You're well prepared. Pitching my ex-husband to the deep end.
The one who lent money to George and effectively sent him to a debt trap was my foster father. He was a known figure in the financial industry, well connected in various fields. George was on a family trip abroad with my parting gift. It was impossible with George's part-time job salary, but he sold all of my jewelry. George was ecstatic because he got a lot of money. He was having a blast overseas with that money. When I got married, my foster father told me to protect this one thing. He strictly ordered that when I divorce, I should leave the jewelry and the house.
I'm always amazed at your audacity, Dad.
My foster father had connections with the precious metal buyer that George used. He had information that George, who sold my jewelry, was going overseas.
You show up just in time in front of George, and you see through everything. I have sources. I also know you are getting along with the young bartender.
I nearly spit out my tea laughing at what he said. After George's uproar, the manager took a liking to James. So, he brought other colleagues along to the bar. That's when my boss said to James,
James, do you have someone you're interested in here? Be honest.
Directed by my manager's leading question, he looked at me while explaining. 23-year-old James had one-sided feelings for me. He seemed to have liked me since we first met. James was self-deprecating about being immature and not being good enough for me, but the manager was adamant.
James, you are a great guy. His looks and personality. Go and tell her your feelings.
I tried to stop the manager's momentum, but I got confessed by James.
I like you, Hannah. If you're okay with someone as inexperienced as me, let's get together. Wait. I'm 29 years old. I'm 6 years older than you. And I'm divorced too. That's not a problem. I like you, Hannah.
In such a turn of events, I now have a 23-year-old boyfriend. My manager was overjoyed, saying,
I'm your wingman.
I was thinking of telling my foster father later, but he found out.
I went to James's bar. He's a very nice young man. He's different from your ex-husband who would berate you. Dad, you're moving too fast.
My foster father has always been a worrier when it comes to me. Although he is an extreme person who can do so much to George who disrespected me, he is a kind father. I am more than happy to be this man's daughter.
Thank you, Dad.
When I told my foster father my feelings with a smile, he smiled back. Next time I take a break, I thought I'd go to the hot springs with my dear foster father. James will also be coming with us. I promised to marry him. Next time, James is going to greet my foster father. I'm sure my father and James will make a good family. I reported to my father with a smile that I was going to start a new family. My father smiled and said,
"Congratulations, Hannah."